On February 11, 2012, Whitney Houston was found unconscious in a bathtub at a hotel in Hollywood. Drugs, this ruthless monster, doesn't just prey on the poor but devours legends and dazzling lives alike. No matter the wealth, power, or fame, they are still easy targets for this dark force. Behind the spotlight, they face loneliness, constant pressure, and just one weak moment can drag them into darkness. Leave a comment with the number 1 if you want to join us in exploring the tragic stories of R&B stars who once stood at the pinnacle but fell to the depths of this monster. David Ruffin, the star behind My Girl, was found unconscious in a strange car, his body flooded with cocaine. He was the lead singer of The Temptations, the greatest group in Motown history. In 1965, his lead vocal on My Girl soared to number 1 on the Billboard charts, making him an overnight star. Tall, with a captivating face and a smoky, mesmerizing voice, David Ruffin embodied the image of a star at the time. But behind the spotlight was a shattered soul, a man slowly falling apart in the dazzling world he had created. In 1964, Ruffin officially joined The Temptations. Within 2 years, he and the group had produced a series of major hits like Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Beauty Is Only Skin Deep, and I Know I'm Losing You. The success came too fast and too intense. But with that came brutal pressure. Ruffin became obsessed with delivering the perfect performance. He slept less than 3 hours each night, terrified of losing his voice, his place, his everything. And then he turned to cocaine. At first it was just a little to combat exhaustion, but within a few months it became something he couldn't live without. He used it before going on stage, after shows, and even when there were no performances. By 1966, Ruffin's behavior began to change. He became erratic, experiencing mental breakdowns and yelling during performances. In 1968, after requesting that the label name an album David Ruffin and the Temptations and being refused, he was fired. What followed were desperate actions like storming the stage of his former group in front of thousands of fans, screaming and grabbing the microphone. His solo career began with the illusion of being a true star, but it was followed by a series of failures, unsuccessful albums, and canceled contracts. He was arrested in 1972 and 1975 for cocaine possession. In 1982, he thought he was on the verge of a comeback, but addiction extinguished every opportunity. By 1985, Ruffin was living in a cheap motel, performing at community halls in small towns for about $250 per show. Record labels turned their backs on him. His family distanced themselves. Most friends cut ties. He wandered homeless with no one waiting for him. On May 31st, 1991, Ruffin recorded a brief session with his old friend Eddie Kendrick in Philadelphia. After the session, he had only $40 in cash. Then he disappeared. That night, he was seen at a drug den in North Philly. Witnesses later said that Ruffin had used at least 2 doses of 80% cocaine within 12 hours, without eating or sleeping. Around dawn on June 1st, he was found unconscious in an old car next to a stranger, a drug dealer he knew. The man drove him to the University of Pennsylvania hospital, opened the door, pulled Ruffin's body from the back seat, and left without saying a word. David Ruffin died in silence. He had no identification. His wallet only contained $53 in cash. No one knew who he was until the hospital called the police and traced his fingerprints. 3 days later, his family was notified. There was no grand funeral, no media coverage. David Ruffin, a symbol of the golden era, passed away as an anonymous corpse abandoned in a cold city, much like life had abandoned him in his final decade. Frankie Lyman, the teen prodigy, was found dead on the floor with a needle in his hand. Frankie Lyman was the name that set America on fire. At just 13 years old, the skinny black boy from Harlem topped the Billboard charts with Why Do Fools Fall in Love? His soaring voice, explosive dance moves, and sparkling eyes made him not just a musical prodigy, but a cultural icon. For the first time, a black teenage boy appeared on national television, leaving white audiences in stunned amazement. Lyman didn't just break musical barriers, he also challenged racial boundaries. But fame came too soon, and Frankie wasn't prepared to bear its weight. By 1957, he left the teenagers before even turning 14. Behind the spotlight was a boy with no father, no mother, no guidance or protection. He was thrown into a whirlwind of contracts, profits, recording, and performing, handling it all alone. He signed his own contracts, bought his own stage suits, dragged his suitcase on tour, and then discovered heroin. No one stopped him. By the time he was 15, Frankie was injecting heroin daily. His decline was relentless. His teeth decayed, his face hollowed, his skin darkened, and his voice disappeared. Performances became fewer. In 1961, the police arrested Lyman in Manhattan. 2 needles, a packet of heroin, and a frail body like a skeleton. He was sent to rehab, and everyone thought he could start over. But just a few months after leaving rehab, Frankie fell back into the same old cycle: nightclubs, heroin, and the numb sleep in the endless jazz music. He loved, married, and left 3 women in the span of 3 years. Only his last marriage was legal. Amamira Eagle was pregnant, but their seemingly perfect family fell apart when the baby didn't survive. Frankie couldn't overcome the shock. In the final 3 months of 1967, he vanished from the music scene. No one saw him on stage. No one could reach him by phone. All that remained were piled-up bills and regular drug deliveries to his old apartment in the Bronx. On February 28, 1968, Frankie returned to Harlem with a glimmer of hope. He had just signed a new performance contract. He told an acquaintance that he wanted to celebrate. That night, he went to his foster mother's house, locked himself in a room, took out a pure heroin dose, the expensive kind that police later confirmed was over 80% pure. He prepared the dose. He injected it. Then he collapsed on the cold wooden floor, never to wake up. The next morning, his foster mother opened the door and found Frankie motionless, the needle still in his hand, his body cold as ice. He was quickly buried in an unmarked grave at a cemetery in the Bronx. No tombstone, no name. A genius who once shook the nation ended his life in complete silence at the age of 25. Do you care about these stories? If so, leave a comment with number 2. If not, leave a comment with number 5. Sly Stone, the genius of funk, spent his later years hiding away in an old rundown RV. He was the mastermind behind iconic hits like Everyday People, Dance to the Music, and a series of songs that reshaped American music. Leading Sly and the Family Stone, the first multiracial band to break racial barriers on stage in America, he was a symbol of innovation. In the early 1970s, Sly was revered by the likes of Miles Davis and James Brown. He had it all: fame, wealth, and an unstoppable future. But the truth is, everything came crashing down so rapidly that no one truly understood what happened. By 1971, after the album There's a Riot Going On, Sly was completely exhausted. He couldn't create anymore. Every time he sat at the piano, his head felt like it was going to explode. After 72 hours of sleeplessness, he banged on the piano keys, screaming into the empty walls, locking himself in the studio all night. Then one day, his manager handed him a small bag of cocaine. One sniff, and he wrote 4 songs. The second time, he didn't leave the chair for 3 days. From that moment on, he couldn't stop. By 1973, the band's performances became a gamble. Sly might not show up, arrive 4 hours late, or stagger onto the stage half-conscious, gun in hand, wearing sunglasses, muttering nonsense. The band broke up in 1975, but Sly kept going. He switched from cocaine to PCP, a drug that made him believe the FBI was following him and that his drum machine could talk. Between 1980 and 1987, he was arrested 26 times for everything from drug possession, disturbing the peace assault, to driving without a license. One time, he appeared in court in pajamas, wearing sunglasses, sitting in a fake wheelchair and shouting, "Funk is not a crime." By 1993, he completely vanished. For 14 years, no one saw him perform. In 2007, he was found living in a rundown RV in Los Angeles. No electricity, no water, no family getting by with a $1 loaf of bread. He stole electricity from a nearby laundromat to charge his wheelchair. Inside the RV was an old guitar, a bag of drugs, and a man who had once sold over 30 million records. By 2011, his net worth was under $100. In the past 30 years, he had not stepped on stage. When asked if he would return, he mumbled, "I'm already gone." Rick James self-destructed in a sea of cocaine violence and wild delusions. Rick James was the king of American funk. He not only revived Motown with his masterpiece Street Songs, but also brought a distinctive, wild, unrestrained style full of raw sensuality. He wrote, performed, and broke every moral boundary in the music industry. But then he burned himself out in the very fire he had ignited. In 1981, Rick reached the peak of his fame, but it was also the year he began snorting cocaine every 20 minutes. The pressure to maintain his creative energy and stage presence pulled him into a spiral of temptation. $1 million vanished in 2 years, fueling the burning hunger in his mind. No one knew if Rick was composing or losing his sanity. His studio turned into a colorful madhouse. Rick lived in his own world where every sound, light, and person had to submit to his mood swings. He stopped touring. His romantic pursuits were disastrous. 24 women in his entourage had to sign agreements to meet his every demand. One manager, who was 5 minutes late, had a gun pointed at his head. But immediately after, Rick would throw money at them as if to apologize for his manic outbursts. He couldn't distinguish love from hate, sobriety from delusion. Only cocaine felt real to him. In 1991, Rick kidnapped a woman and tortured her for 6 hours, slashing her face, setting her on fire, and forcing her to inhale drugs from a heated spoon. Rick called it creative art. 2 years later, another victim was bound with duct tape, her hair chopped in patches, while Rick laughed maniacally. The court sentenced him to over 5 years in prison. When he was released, Rick was nothing more than a walking corpse. His memory was damaged. His heart beat erratically out of control. His lungs were destroyed by cocaine smoke. He couldn't even remember his son's birthday. No more touring, no more albums, no one invited him to perform. On August 6, 2004, Rick died on a sofa in a rented apartment. 9 types of drugs were found in his blood, enough to kill a horse. No more stage lights, no more applause, just a decaying body and a once blazing past that had burned itself out. Ike Turner, the king of R&B, collapsed in a whirlwind of drugs, violence, and delusion. Ike Turner was a rare musical phenomenon. His 1951 song, Rocket 88, is considered the first shot fired in the birth of rock and roll. He was a songwriter, producer, guitarist, bandleader, a pioneer who laid the foundation for countless musical trends. But the higher he soared, the deeper he sank into darkness. Behind the stage lights was a grim world of control, insecurity, addiction, violence, and fear. By the late 1960s, Ike began using cocaine to stay sharp and keep up with his frenetic workload. Within just a few years, drugs became an indispensable part of his life. From 1974 to 1985, he spent between $500 and $1,000 a day on cocaine and crack, snorting it as soon as he woke up smoking it. before shows injecting it during recording sessions. There were times when he stayed awake for 5 to 7 days straight. His eyes were sunken, his nerves as tight as guitar strings. The higher he got, the more out of control he became. Yet in his mind, he still believed he held power over the band, over Tina, and over the world. At one point, he ordered all the studio windows to be sealed, convinced that the CIA was spying through the sunlight. He installed cameras all over the house and patrolled at night with a gun in hand. In his delusions, he made band members stand still for hours, suspecting someone was plotting against him. Among those around him, Tina Turner endured the most brutal abuse from him. On stage, he ripped off her wig in front of thousands of fans. Behind the scenes, he smashed a microphone into her face after a performance. Tina needed 16 stitches, but didn't dare speak out. She knew he would strangle her in the hotel that night if she said anything. Over 19 years of marriage, she was beaten at least 50 times, hospitalized twice, and often dragged by her hair in front of the band. The worst was in July 1976 at the Statler Hilton Hotel in Dallas. After Ike hit her with his heel, Tina ran from the room, her face swollen, her dress torn, carrying only 36 cents and a mobile gas card. She escaped that marriage forever. By 1987, the police had raided Ike's house 3 times in 3 months. They seized nearly 300 grams of cocaine, 2 guns, and 5 crack pipes with fresh blood on them. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison, but upon his release, he returned to drug use, went through rehab, and relapsed. In the last 20 years of his life, Ike entered rehab at least 15 times, but none of them were successful. In 2004, he appeared on TV. His face was scarred, his hands trembling, and his eyes vacant like a man on the brink of death. He hardly knew who he was. 3 years later, he died in bed from heart failure, but his blood still contained active cocaine. The toxins from crack had corroded his heart and lungs day by day until they stopped functioning. The coroner's report was clear severe history of cocaine abuse, heart severely damaged by drugs. No funeral, no memorial. Tina Turner wrote only one line, "I don't mourn him. I mourn the man he could have been." R. Kelly was once the king of R&B, dominating the charts with over 75 million records sold worldwide. He was behind hits like I Believe I Can Fly and Ignition Remix. He wasn't just an artist, he was an icon, a natural talent, a songwriting genius whose influence spanned 2 decades in American music. But behind the stage lights was a nightmare that lasted for decades, hidden by money, fame, and drugs. From his childhood in the South Side of Chicago, Kelly was sexually abused for years by family members. No one protected him. There was no room for weakness. He grew up with repressed trauma and first sought escape through music, then turned to drugs. The first pills appeared in the late 1980s when he began rising to fame with public announcement. But his addiction took root as fame came too quickly and too intensely. By the mid-1990s, Kelly used drugs like they were meals, cocaine, MDMA, Xanax, anything to keep him alert on stage, but also pushing him into delusions of power. In his 17,000-square-foot mansion in Chicago, he built a fortress separated from the world. Inside were 6 to 10 underage girls completely under his control. No phones, no privacy, no contact with the outside world. Their lives revolved around a schedule that Kelly imposed. When he was high, which was often 4 days a week, he would organize violent, degrading group games, leaving many victims with lasting trauma, some even rendered infertile. Each week, Kelly would consume an average of 4 grams of cocaine mixed with alcohol and mild sedatives to maintain his absolute control. In a 2019 FBI document, one victim described writing his name in her own blood on the bathroom wall as a cry for help. No one saved her. For over 15 years, Kelly lived like a tyrant, sheltered by drugs and fame. In 2017, the Not or Mute R. Kelly movement erupted, sparking a wave of accusations. From 2018 to 2021, his world collapsed, swept away like a whirlwind. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, lost all his music royalties, and faced 13 civil lawsuits totaling $37 million. Record labels removed his name from their rosters. In prison, Kelly descended into severe depression, taking mood-stabilizing medication daily, and was isolated to avoid attacks. He sat motionless for hours, muttering old songs, haunted by his past. Drugs had killed his soul long ago. Sean Combs is one of the most powerful moguls in American music. He built the Bad Boy Records empire, launching the careers of many stars to the top and amassing a fortune worth billions of dollars. Not just a music producer, Sean is also a fashion icon, entrepreneur, and top-tier entertainer for over 2 decades. But behind the glamorous exterior lies a chaotic machine fueled by drugs, lust, and power. Since the 1990s, when Bad Boy was founded, Sean lived amidst endless parties where cocaine, MDMA, and ecstasy were laid out on tables like decorations, always ready for stars like him. But amid the drug-fueled nights of partying, Sean began losing himself. He became addicted to control, addicted to the submissive gazes of others, addicted to the pills that made him feel invincible. Every night, he consumed at least 3 grams of cocaine mixed with alcohol to maintain a false sense of alertness. Those close to him described him as a machine running on stimulants and delusions. In the 2000s, he reached the height of fame, not only running a music company, but expanding into fashion, film, and liquor. But to maintain that vast empire, he entered a dangerous game where power and money intertwined with drugs and violent crime. Sean turned the parties into tools of manipulation. Dozens of young artists, models, and underage girls were brought to his mansion in Los Angeles, where cameras were disabled and doors locked tight. While the media praised the Bad Boy empire, inside those soundproof rooms were drug-fueled orgies and violence. Allegations began to leak in 2019 but were suppressed with money and threats. Some victims later revealed they were forced to use drugs, secretly filmed in compromising positions, and threatened with the release of videos if they spoke out. By 2024, everything exploded. The FBI launched a federal investigation raiding Sean's house and seizing videos, phones, and sealed packages of cocaine. Over 50 women officially accused him. Images from the wild parties were leaked. Business contracts were terminated. Bank accounts were frozen. Sean was arrested on charges of human trafficking, extortion, and using drugs to control his victims. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The drugs not only destroyed his mind, they caused an entire empire to collapse in just a few months. James Brown, the godfather of soul, was a towering icon of funk and soul, known for his explosive performances, powerful voice, and iconic dance moves that drove millions wild. He stood at the peak of fame with timeless hits like I Got You, I Feel Good, and Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. But behind the stage lights was a man living in chaos. By the late 1960s, as Brown's career soared, his life spiraled out of control. The grueling touring schedule, financial pressures, and an ever-growing entourage kept him on constant edge. Reluctant to show fatigue or falter, Brown turned to cocaine, then to PCP, a brutal drug that caused hallucinations and stripped him of his ability to control himself. He used drugs to stay sharp, to keep the stage fire burning, and gradually became a slave to them. By around 1985, James Brown had completely changed. His addiction made him delusional, unstable, and violent. He would scream in the middle of the night, lock himself in rooms with drugs and guns. His wife, Adrienne, was assaulted multiple times, sometimes needing hospitalization after violent outbursts fueled by drugs. Close staff members began to leave him. Many said no one could predict whether Brown would be a musical genius or a madman on any given day. 1988 marked the point of no return. While Brown stormed into an insurance company meeting with a gun, believing they were targeting his assets, then jumped into his car and drove recklessly for over 30 minutes, leading to a high-speed chase across 2 states with the police. When he was arrested, he was drenched in sweat, trembling with urine on the car seat and a high level of cocaine in his blood. Sentenced to 6 years, the image of the Godfather of Soul was completely erased. Released in 1991, James Brown attempted to revive his career, but his body was in ruins. He had lost a significant amount of weight. His nerves were weakened, his eyes twitched uncontrollably, and his voice trembled like an old man's. In the years that followed, he became more reclusive, though still arrested occasionally for violence. He passed away on December 25, 2006, at the age of 73. His body had been ravaged by decades of addiction, depression, and relentless stress. It was a brutal end for a legend who had sacrificed everything for the spotlight. Etta. James, one of the greatest names in the history of R&B and blues, dominated the stage with her soulful and powerful voice captivating millions. Hits like At Last and Tell Mama brought her to the peak of fame. But beneath the bright stage lights was a tragic life pulling her from glory to the depths. Etta James's life was never easy. Born into poverty in Los Angeles, she faced abuse and violence from a young age. Feelings of abandonment and loneliness pushed her toward music as her only escape. But the music world was far from kind. Her career, though brilliant, became a trap that tore her apart from the inside. The pressure to become a national icon led her to drugs, starting with heroin, a substance the entertainment industry always had an endless supply of. Heroin quickly became Etta's closest companion, numbing her emotional pain. But it opened the door to a nightmare. By 1969, Etta had fallen into a downward spiral. Heroin consumed her career. She was arrested multiple times for drug possession and disrupting performances. Her record deals vanished, and her career faded into obscurity. She was no longer a music icon, but a shadow of a woman, slowly dying under the weight of addiction. Etta James's legacy began to fade. In the 1970s, she lived in poverty, consumed by drug cravings, missing golden opportunities that life had once offered. By the 1980s, Etta began the difficult journey of addiction recovery. She fought against herself and the scars in her mind that would never heal. Though strong enough to rise and start anew, the years of addiction continued to ravage her body. She passed away in 2012 after a long and arduous battle with illness, but her musical legacy lives on forever. Whitney Houston, hailed as the Golden Girl of music, conquered the world with her enchanting voice and timeless hits. She was an R&B legend with songs like I Will Always Love You becoming a global icon. But her brilliant career was quickly destroyed by the darkness of drugs, turning her life into an irreversible tragedy. Starting her career in the mid-1980s, Whitney Houston emerged as an unstoppable music phenomenon. The daughter of Cissy Houston, a renowned singer, she came from a family with a rich musical legacy, and everyone expected her to continue and expand that heritage. However, the pressure of fame, along with expectations from her mother and the public, gradually pushed her into a painful world. After marrying Bobby Brown in 1992, a man struggling with addiction and out-of-control behavior, Whitney turned to drugs to cope with the unbearable stress. She fell into the trap of addiction, and everything began to unravel from there. Her career, her voice, and her personal life started to fall apart by the late 1990s. Addiction not only destroyed her sweet voice, but also robbed her of the ability to control her life. Each time she stepped on stage instead of shining, she fell into the darkness of inner struggles. She couldn't maintain stability during performances. Her voice became shaky, her high notes no longer soared, and sometimes she would just stand on stage panting lost. By 2009, during a world tour, Whitney showed signs of exhaustion. Fans were disappointed and angry as her performances declined. At a performance in Vancouver, she misspoke, ran out of breath, and couldn't finish receiving boos from the audience. Failure consumed her, and her once brilliant career seemed like a distant memory. On February 11, 2012, Whitney Houston passed away from drowning in the bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Los Angeles. She was just 48 years old, preparing for the Grand Grammy Awards ceremony. Although there was no direct evidence linking drugs to her death, the coroner's report found cocaine, marijuana, and alprazolam, a sedative, in her system. The combination of drugs, alcohol, and sedatives weakened her body to the point that it couldn't fight the water, and she drowned in the bathtub. It was a tragic, cold scene. Bobby Brown, a New Jack Swing legend, was a shining star in the music world of the late 80s with hits like My Prerogative and the album Don't Be Cruel, lighting up an entire generation. But behind the spotlight, darkness was always lurking. The first signs of his downfall appeared when Bobby spiraled into addiction. A childhood marked by violence and poverty in Boston left deep emotional scars. The fame that initially amplified his success also magnified the pressures, making cocaine, heroin, and alcohol constant companions during his darkest years. His marriage to Whitney Houston, though seemingly the perfect love story, couldn't save him from the inner storms he faced. Instead, they were dragged down a path of addiction with no way out. By 1992, just a few years after becoming an international star, Bobby began getting arrested for DUI, disturbing the peace, and criminal behavior. His fame quickly faded as cocaine consumed his mind. His performances became disastrous. His voice lost its smoothness, and the name Bobby Brown slowly disappeared from the touring lists. By 2012, after Whitney's death, Bobby sank deep into despair. Drugs continued to tighten their grip on him, and his life became hopeless. A star who once had it all was now just a shadow of broken dreams, a negative icon that left people sighing in regret. But the music world was never kind. Wilson Pickett, the only true legend of the 60s and 70s, became famous for iconic hits like In the Midnight Hour and Land of 1,000 Dances, capturing the hearts of millions. But behind the stage lights was a story of pain and despair. Starting his career with unwavering confidence, Pickett never imagined that his early success would become a double-edged sword. By the 1970s, as music evolved, Pickett felt left behind. He not only faced professional pressures, but also the weight of racism and a lack of understanding from the music industry, which weighed heavily on his heart. And so drugs became an inseparable companion. Cocaine and alcohol served as temporary escapes during long nights, but his life grew darker. In 1988, he was arrested for driving under the influence of drugs, completely lost and directionless. The image of the shining star had now faded into that of a drunken, staggering man relentlessly pursued by paparazzi. In 2006, Wilson Pickett's heart stopped beating not directly from drugs, but from the long-lasting damage they had caused, taking everything away. Marvin Gaye, the legendary soul icon and R&B superstar of the 60s and 70s, left an indelible mark with timeless songs like What's Going On and Sexual Healing. His voice, smooth as velvet and full of emotion, touched the hearts of millions, telling stories of love, sorrow, and hope. But behind the stage lights, Marvin's life was a tragic ballad where the notes of genius merged with the melodies of pain. The death of his close friend Tammy Terrell in 1970 plunged him into the depths of depression, where cocaine became a temporary escape, pulling him into sleepless nights and a cycle of self-destruction. Marvin Gaye's life slowly spiraled into a chaotic whirlwind. Performances that once captivated audiences became erratic, reflecting his broken soul and deteriorating health. Debts piled up with tax bills amounting to $9.2 million like a noose tightening around him. Intense arguments with his controlling father deepened the wounds in his spirit. The culmination of this tragedy occurred on April 1, 1984, when during a violent confrontation his own father shot and took the life of the musical genius. Marvin's death not only ended a journey filled with sorrow, but also left an everlasting void in the music world, where his voice still echoes a reminder of both the beauty and the tragedy of a sensitive soul. Chaka Khan. The Queen of R&B was not only a music icon, but also a shining example of talent and dedication. In the 70s and 80s, her career soared with hits like I Feel For You and Through the Fire, making her one of the brightest stars in R&B. But behind the stage lights, a silent storm was devastating her life. Under the pressures of the music industry, especially gender and racial discrimination, Khan turned to cocaine and heroin to numb the pain. By the early 1980s, drugs became a necessary crutch, dulling her senses. Her career crumbled as performances became lifeless and lackluster. The voice that was once a source of pride lost its power, causing her to miss important recording sessions. By the mid-1980s, Chaka was no longer the shining star, but a broken woman weighed down by drugs. Faced with $2 million in debt, she burned through most of her assets on cocaine, heroin, and lavish parties. Her life became a series of dark days as drugs dragged her into financial ruin and health crises with no way out. The image of the international star was now just a shadow fighting alone in the darkness, with no one to share the pain. Fortunately, after years of being lost in the dark, Khan found a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. The journey to recovery was tough, but she regained her confidence even though the shadow of addiction still lingered in her life. Mary J. Blige, the queen of hip-hop soul, exploded onto the music scene in the 90s with her debut album, What's the 411, 1992, a masterpiece that blended her raw, emotional voice with an irresistible power. Her singing was like a breath of fresh air, telling stories of love, pain, and resilience, touching the hearts of millions of fans. From the streets of poverty to the peak of fame, Blige became an icon, dominating the charts with timeless hits. But behind the spotlight, she carried deep scars from a childhood filled with violence and deprivation, where pain never fully healed, pushing her into the dark spiral of alcohol and cocaine. At the peak of her career, when Mary J. Blige's name shone brightly in the music world, the shadow of addiction quietly tightened its grip on her. She spent millions of dollars on drugs and alcohol, seeking temporary escape from the painful memories. But the price she paid was steep. Her health deteriorated, performances that once mesmerized became chaotic, interviews became disorganized, and her absence from major events eroded her public image. Debts piled up like an unbearable burden, while her soul sank deeper into the abyss. Fans still saw a shining star on stage, but few knew that every note she sang was a painful internal battle. By 1997, Mary J. Blige bravely opened up about her battle with addiction, but it wasn't until 2001 that she truly faced it and fought to regain her sobriety. Her recovery journey became a testament to her resilience as she slowly emerged from the darkness to reclaim the light. In the mid-2000s, Blige revived her career with inspirational albums, though they didn't shine as brightly as her initial breakthrough. She not only found herself again, but also became a symbol of rebirth, inspiring those struggling with their own pain. While her later albums didn't reach the heights of her earlier successes, Mary J. Blige's legacy remains a powerful story of overcoming adversity, a song of determination and hope. Lisa Left Eye. Lopes, a standout member of the legendary group TLC, was a talented, creative, and bold star, but behind the spotlight was a life filled with chaos, addiction, and poor choices. In the 1990s, as TLC reached the height of their success, Lisa sank deeper into addiction. She drank 2 bottles of vodka a day during periods of depression. Unable to control her anger or cravings for drugs, addiction became her way of coping with the constant arguments with her boyfriend and group members. Consumed by loneliness and despair, alcohol numbed her creativity, fractured her group relationships, and dulled her star power. The breaking point came when she set fire to her boyfriend Andre Rison's $1.3 million mansion, leading to 5 days in jail and 3 years of probation. Lisa's career quickly crumbled, isolating her in loss and frustration. While TLC continued, Left Eye was pushed to the margins, unable to overcome her anger, impulsive behavior, or the wrong choices that led to her downfall. In April 2002, Lisa traveled to Honduras to clear her mind, but that trip became her final journey. On that fateful day, Lisa drove recklessly on a remote road, her mind in turmoil after strange events and an obsession with death. When her car swerved and flipped multiple times, Lisa was thrown from the vehicle and died instantly. She was only 30 years old. In her backpack were tranquilizers, a small bottle of alcohol, and a handwritten journal filled with disjointed thoughts about the soul and salvation. Lisa, Left Eye. Lopes left this world in solitude, leaving behind an unanswered question. Could she have overcome her addiction and shined once again, or was it an inevitable fate? Donny Hathaway, an R&B genius pushed to the brink by the voices in his head. One of the most legendary voices of the 70s, Donny Hathaway moved the world of R&B with his heartbreaking love songs, his divine voice, and his unique artistic soul. In 1970, he reached the pinnacle of glory with his album Everything is Everything. But less than 4 years later, he began hearing whispers in his head, growing louder, distorted, and threatening. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, Donny broke down. The medication caused short-term memory loss, slowed his reflexes, and silenced his voice. Unable to bear the weight of his mental struggles, he dove into a maze of stimulants, sleeping pills, amphetamines, alcohol, and outdated antipsychotic medications. By 1975, he owed nearly $80,000 spent on drugs, electronics, and bodyguards to protect himself from being kidnapped by the CIA. In the studio, he would scream and slam the microphone, believing he was being watched. His projects stalled. Friends distanced themselves. Between 1976 and 1978, he only performed twice, and both times ended in chaos. On the night of January 12, 1979, he was invited to New York to record a new duet with Roberta Flack. The session lasted 5 hours, but Hathaway was unstable. He repeatedly unplugged cables, knocked over equipment, believing that his life force was being drained from a distance. Despite Roberta's pleading, the session was canceled. At 2 a.m., staff at the Essex House Hotel raised the alarm. A body had fallen from the 15th floor. It was Donny. His room showed no signs of a struggle. He left no suicide note, only a torn antipsychotic prescription and a few unidentified white pills. El DeBarge, with his angelic voice, fell into freefall within the storm of heroin. Once an R&B icon in the 80s with hits like Rhythm of the Night, El DeBarge mesmerized the world with his natural singing talent. But behind that voice was a broken soul shattered from childhood. Abused by his father and growing up in poverty, L's life was steeped in chaos. Away from the spotlight, heroin became the only companion he clung to every night. From 1986, when DeBarge disbanded, L spiraled downward, spending $2,000 a week on cocaine and heroin. Alone in hotel rooms with bloodshot eyes, he would inject just to have the strength to sing. In 1992, he was arrested for drug possession. What followed was a sharp decline. 13 arrests, 3 failed rehab attempts, a stint in prison, and falling from millionaire status to bankruptcy within a decade. By 2001, L declared bankruptcy, wandering from one relative's house to another, sleeping on studio floors, weighing under 110 pounds. His clothes were tattered, his breath reeked of drugs. His siblings weren't any better. All 5 of them struggled with severe addiction, many never getting a second chance. L made a comeback in 2010 with the album Second Chance, but no one was waiting. All that remained was a lost voice screaming from the shell of the man who once had it all. Casey Haley was the soul of Jodeci, the most rebellious R&B group of the 90s, selling millions of records, packing arenas, and delivering hits that shook America. He was the powerful voice, a symbol of sensuality and pride. But in 1994, cracks began to show. Casey couldn't handle the pressures of competition, internal conflicts, and the swirling scandals. He turned to vodka mixed with tranquilizers to escape. Within a year, cocaine became part of the mix. From morning to night, he drank and used drugs as if they were the only thing keeping him alive. On some days, he burned $3,000 just to fuel the fire. The result was a string of disastrous performances where Casey would vomit mid-song, collapse on stage, and even fall asleep in front of thousands of fans. In 1997, he collapsed backstage. Doctors warned him he had to quit drinking immediately. He ignored the advice and escaped the hospital after just 12 hours. By 1998, blood was pouring from his stomach due to severe alcohol-induced ulcers. Over the next 5 years, Casey burned through more than $4 million on alcohol, drugs, and women. His house was foreclosed, his car repossessed, and he slept on friends' sofas. By 2006, he was trembling in rehab, brought there by his mother. When he returned in 2013, KT was a gaunt shadow sitting to sing because of damaged knees with sunken eyes from 20 years of substance abuse. And these are the tragic tales of R&B legends. People who once ruled the stage now live in darkness and regret. Glory, faded dreams shattered. He was the king of rock and roll, a cultural storm that forever changed music. But when Elvis Presley passed away, he wasn't on stage. He wasn't in the recording studio. He was slumped over on the toilet alone in the bathroom at Graceland. That's the brutal truth they didn't want you to hear. On August 16, 1977, the world stopped. Elvis was only 42 and the official cause of death was heart arrhythmia. But that was only part of the story. Behind the velvet curtains of Graceland, Elvis had become a prisoner of his own legend and a mountain of drugs that kept him standing. While fans saw a symbol larger than life, those closest to him saw a broken man addicted, overweight, and delusional. His medicine cabinet wasn't just a cabinet, it was a pharmacy. Barbiturates, Quaaludes, Demerol, Valium, codeine, dozens of drugs for pain, sleep, digestion, and energy, most prescribed in staggering quantities. The truth is, Elvis didn't die from a single overdose. He died from years of chemical abuse covered up by doctors, managers, and even his own family. They wanted to protect the image of the king, even as it was slowly destroying him from the inside. His body had collapsed. He suffered from chronic constipation so severe it was life-threatening. diabetes glaucoma. He couldn't perform without being numbed by medication, but those very drugs were killing him day by day. When he collapsed in the bathroom that morning, it wasn't sudden. It was the final chapter of a long, tragic decline. A king sitting on his porcelain throne, surrounded by secrets and silence. And yet, the legend endures. We remember the jumpsuits, the screaming fans, the signature curled lip, and those famous hip shakes. But behind the legend was a man crying out for help, and no one was willing to stop the machine. Elvis didn't just die from heart failure. He died because he was Elvis Presley. What do you think about these stories? Does addiction prove that it can ruin anyone's life, no matter how great their talent is? Share your thoughts below this video. Tell us the stories you know or feel need to be told. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the harsh truths behind the Hollywood spotlight.